So we're gonna, just a couple housekeeping things. We're going to be taking questions at the end after the artist talk. So please, take notes. You can put those in the chat while the talk's going on. Also, we'll give you a little bit of time at the end to put your questions together. The center is really lucky to partner with Artworks Center for Contemporary Art here in Loveland. And this is where the show is located. We've been partnering with them. This is our 3rd year, and we'll be continuing that partnership. Sarah Labar is the executive director and curator, and she's going to say a few words.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. First, I'd like to give a short statement. Artworks Center for Contemporary Art and the Center for Fine Art Photography honors and acknowledges that the land on which we reside is the traditional territories of the Ute, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Lakota, Apache, and Comanche peoples. We honor elders past, present, and future, and those who have stewarded this land throughout generations. We also recognize that government, academic, and cultural institutions were founded upon and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous people. So a little bit about Artworks. We 3rd year that we've been partnering with the center, and it's just been wonderful all 3 years, and we'll continue that every spring. It's been a wonderful experience for me personally, and also for Artworks. We've been around for about 10 years in Loveland, Colorado. We have 2 beautiful gallery spaces and 20 artist studios. We have 25 studios at the moment, artists in the studios at the moment. Galleries. We also offer 8 exhibitions a year, so they're quarterly. Each the South and the North Gallery open at the same time and switch out every 3 months. So if you are interested in seeing what the rest of the year looks like, please head over to our website, artworksloveland.org. And again, so happy to be partnering with the center yet again. And I just want to say thank you to all of the artists in this exhibition. It has been getting some really fabulous feedback, some great articles, and we're just honored to be able to host your work. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the talk.
The other thing that I wanted you all to know is that Sarah and Artworks actually accept exhibition proposals. So take note, it's a great space. So this show, The Horizon and Everything Within It, it's an exhibition that's focused on, it's basically contemporary photo-based artists' reflection on introspection, self-discovery, and acts of renewal. We're going to hear from each of the artists tonight, and then we'll have some conversation between them, and then we'll take questions. So we are going to start with Alicia.
Thank you, Hamida. Let me make sure I'm sharing my screen and everything is in place. All right. Perfect. Oops. I am very, I always get nervous sharing my screen and everything. It's always like, oops. So hello, everyone. Is everyone being able to see my screen? Perfect. What about now? I think everyone can see.
We can see it. We can see more of the structure of the presentation too now.
Perfect. Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, first, thank you, Hamida, for including us in this exhibition. My mom cannot be here today as she's in Cuba, and she collaborated with me in the videos presented in the show. And as Hamida said, I'm Alicia Rodriguez Alvisa. I'm a visual artist from Cuba. I mainly work with photography, video performance, and performance to explore topics of identity, self-image, gender, and the body, specifically the female body. I'm the daughter of two Cuban visual artists. So since I grew up, I was surrounded by art. I've been very blessed to have mom and dad, and also surrounded by many other students as well. They're art students. My mom, whom again I collaborated with for the video shown in the exhibition, she's in Cuba. Internet connectivity is extremely poor there, and connecting to Zoom from the island is nearly impossible. So she says hi. And I feel bad that she's not being able to be here today, but at the same time, it kind of goes with this, with the topic of our pieces, since it's all about distance and coming together and kind of distancing apart again. So my mom's name is Lidzie Alvisa. She's a visual artist. She primarily works in photography as well. She's one of the pioneers amongst Cuban photographers who started using color photography to represent the female body, and also its relationship to the world. Nowadays, her work is much more broad as she combines photography with other mediums such as installation, drawing, engraving, and kneading. Here are two works of one of the works that we've been doing since, I would say, since I was born, as I mentioned before. Talking to Hamida, one of her goals was for us to share how artistic practice influences our lives and growth. And since the works included in this exhibition are works that my mother and I did together, I decided it would be great to actually show how artistic practice, and since I'm the one here, my artistic practice, how it has been influenced by everything around me since I was born. So my mother and I have always been very close. I was part of some of her early work, as you guys can see here, actually some of my dad's work too. And it was really tough to select the works to show here, as my mom has made incredible work throughout the years, exploring herself as a mother and as a woman. And the image on the left is Identification. It's a drawing that she did as part of a series of drawings called Renaissance, which she made for an exhibition that her and my dad made to celebrate my first year born. And the second image is from a performance called Changing Room that she organized for an art event in Cuba. And later on, we did it again for the Havana Biennale in 2001. This was a non-scripted performance. My mom loved seeing me paint and draw, and I was also always expressing my artistic inclinations, I would say, since I was little, and she wanted to explore that a lot more. She knew I was outgoing, so she made a changing room station just in a park full of body creams, makeup, nail polish, gels, feminine products, all kinds of things. She literally gave me the best Canva to work on, and it wasn't a piece of paper, it wasn't a coloring book, it was herself. She gave me full control of her body for the length of the performance, and this is just a couple of examples of our relationship, not only as mother and daughter, but also as how we live in art. I was only 18 years old when I left Cuba to come to the States to study fine arts in 2014. And that was one of the most difficult times in my life, or also one of the most difficult things I had to do was separating from my family. And this photo is part of my photo series, You're There, Are You There, There You Are, a series that I started back in 2017. And it was the result of many shifts in my life. It started as an exploration of my own insecurities, my relationship with my body and my identity. And till this day, the more I revisit this series and talk about it, the more I realize how much I thought I was exploring myself, or just exploring myself, but at the same time, I was looking for comfort and safety, which is exactly how I always felt with my mother by my side. And in the pictures, there's always an Alicia that is always me, and there is another one that always transforms. One is a friend, another picture is the sister, and the fairy, the mother. So this is a great example also, as everything kind of like comes together, and it shapes as I age, if that makes sense. So while I was studying, I went to Cuba a few times, but for only a few days at a time. And it wasn't until 2019 that I decided to leave Boston, which is where I went to school. And I decided to spend a couple of months in Cuba, spend more time with my family. And what started as a couple of months trip turned into a 5-month long trip because of the pandemic. My mother and I had ever been together for this long since I left Cuba. And we both went through some quite rough times. Our relationship was always strong, but definitely we needed that time together. And we always wanted to do something together again. We hadn't done anything since I was a teenager. And we didn't have the opportunity, also because of distance, but also because of time. But now with the pandemic, all we had was time. And we were invited to do a virtual show for Mother's Day in 2020. And that's when we knew it was the perfect time. And that's how we started to come up with the videos that Hamida and the Center of Photography is showing right now. We made 3 videos as part of the series, and 2 of those videos are the ones that we're showing in this exhibition. All the videos are based on actual experiences that we've lived and felt through our separation and coming back together. For instance, one, which is the image that you guys can see right now, comes from literally laying down on my mother's belly while watching TV back in Cuba. I remember closing my eyes and letting myself just hear her belly. I could hear her inside, and it definitely felt like I just was inside of her. The conversations around how we ended up making the videos were really smooth. It just came out like perfectly. It was just drawing from our own experiences, what we felt touching each other or being near each other or in our conversations, and the videos just were being able to be made, if that makes sense. So none of the videos were scripted. We did work with cues. We knew that we were meant to do our specific parts, such as my mother would lay down on the bed, breathe deeply, and I would just lay there with eyes closed, right? We knew the cues. And I'd say it really felt that the actual pieces started once we started feeling the power of touching each other and being there and breathing together and our closeness. We lasted about 10 minutes there in that recording the video, and the connection was really, really powerful, that it really felt like we were one again. And honestly, if she hadn't told me that her back was killing her, I think we would have continued with that connection. It was really life changing in terms of our relationship as well. The second video that is included in the show, it's called The Dance of the Migrating Hands. And this is the second video, and it was filmed right the day before I was about to leave Cuba. We were working on the show while all of a sudden I got the call that I had been finally assigned a humanitarian flight to come back to the States. And if I didn't take that flight, my status in the US was going to be jeopardized. So this video became a lot more meaningful than we expected. It represented the end of that time together, literally, and going back to the uncertainty of, not knowing when to see each other again. And we still are in that time. We haven't been able to see each other again. And knowing that, the time these works were made was time which, it was a time which many people were separated, isolated, and even scared. I would say we feel very lucky that we spent that time together, having the privilege to make art and work on our relationship. And it was quite the experience. And I'm glad that I've been able to share it with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. That was beautiful.
Thank
Fantastic. You. Thank you. Kristianne?
Hi, I'm Kristianne Riddle. I am a visual artist. I've been working in mostly photography, but just started exploring sculptural objects. I've actually always kind of worked sculpturally, but the project is like kind of coming back to that. So I grew up in Southern California, and I grew up at the beach, and I grew up sailing. And when I got into my 20s, I was very adventurous. I used to travel by myself a lot. And I climbed mountains, I climbed volcanoes. I was really pulled into very extreme adventurous sports and things where there were a lot of just really out there, you know, people wanting to climb mountains and cross oceans and stuff like that. I think it came from my background. My grandparents started a travel agency, and they, my grandfather would travel to China and India in the 50s. And it was always just hearing all that adventure and exploring that. So I did kind of put off the whole family thing for as long as I could. I was a mountaineering guide into my late 20s in Colorado. And I finally figured out that it was time to meet someone. And I think it had a lot to do with, you know, societal pressures to, you know, it's time, you know, to get married and have kids. And so I've primarily been pursuing that for the last 25 years. And I've come to a place where my kids are now in their teens, and my husband and I have been together for 25 years. And I was feeling probably 4 years ago, I was feeling a pull to find myself again, I guess. I felt like I kind of left that behind when I had gotten married and started a family. I'm gonna pull up, I'm gonna share my screen to just get some, let's see. There it is, share. Okay. Just to get some of the images that I've been working on up. So it was before COVID, where I began feeling like I needed to create a project. And it was, I think COVID really pushed me into it. I had been taking a long time to figure this out. And I knew that I was really craving, you know, some kind of flow in my life. And I was feeling a lot of tension between me wanting to be out there, exploring the world and getting back to that place where I was before the family. But I also didn't want to leave my family. So I knew a project was bubbling up. And during COVID, I would spend a lot of time on the beach where nobody else was at. The beaches were empty, even after we were allowed to go on. And I would walk at night, and I would have my camera, and I would just take pictures as the water was flowing in and out. And it was, you know, long shutter speeds because it was at night. And I was just trying to be immersed in my environment. And then before this, I had been making, I had been trying to loosen up my work. So my commercial work was loosening up, and I really wanted a project of fine art work that was going to be a lot looser than I had been doing. I had been doing a lot of control, you know, having a lot of control, and I've been wanting everything to be just right. And my family life was like that. I was trying to control a lot of things that were going on in the family, and I needed to just kind of let go. And this project helped me do that. I took a critique group with Hamida, and it really just gave me the permission to do that, to loosen up. And Hamida said, just play. And so I just started printing my work, and I would fold and crinkle and tear, and I just tore everything apart. These are some of the images that I used. on my prints that came from my walks on the beach that were informing this work, to talk about my freedom, my sense of flow that I was craving, wanting groundedness. And then these are some of my early pieces. I was just still really confined. I was, just rolling the paper. I was folding it as origami. I love the process of origami. It gave me, this feeling that I was exactly the same feeling I had when I was trying to manage my family and the issues that were going on in the family. I would make a crease, or, I would put in an impression that wasn't really used in a finished shape, but it was important to make that shape happen later on. So it was important to actually shaping it. So I felt like the origami was really important to this work, but it did still feel very restrictive and controlled, and I wanted something looser. So I started making vessels. I knew vessels were going to be a part of it because of my sailing background, and just me as a woman, and women, are considered the vessels of society. And I wanted, and the sense of being held came up a lot for me, wanting to be held, and me being there to hold my family. So I knew it would be something that was going to hold some, be a symbolic of holding. So I was making shapes and sewing, and I used wire, and I used thread or yarn. And so these are some of the early shapes that kind of informed the current work. And what happened was, this is some sewing. This is just, I use a sewing machine that I used to mend sails. And I was mending our 40 by 60 foot sail for our 50-foot boat. And it was very physical, and I was pushing things, pushing it through. I had to use my body to push it through the sewing machine. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I realized I really need to be sewing this work. And so what I did was I started by sewing it like you would sew fabric, and then I would have to turn it inside out. So it's, I would have to wrinkle it to get it to fold inside out. And so that's why it's so much more organic, and it ended up being exactly what I needed, because my whole body was involved and I was turning it inside out, and I had to, physically manipulate it. And so then I started to embellish it.
Kristianne,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. We're at time. So if you
okay.
finish your thought. Thank you.
Okay. So the embellishments were just the next phase of it. Okay, I guess I could talk forever. Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay, Rafael.
Hey, thanks, Hamida. I'm gonna set my timer here because I could also just keep going. Thank you, Hamida, and thank you, Artworks, for inviting all of us to be here. Just really excited to be in conversation with all of these artists. I'm going to share my screen here and set my timer. And I'm going to talk about a body of work called Life Stands Still Here, which is on view at Artworks. And you can see my screen, right, Hamida, and not my notes? I think so. Great. So I'm going to start by saying that prior to this work, I had gone through a really transformational change in my life, which is that I had, as a young queer person, I had been dating someone for about 5 years. This was the first man that I fell in love with. This was someone who really informed the way in which I sort of created my identity as a queer person. And I also fell under the trap, I think, maybe just, again, as a young queer person, of letting this relationship define who I was, as opposed to just defining myself as a queer person within myself. And the work that I'm showing today is actually I haven't talked about it in over 5 years. I think this is the first time I'm talking about it since, so it's kind of an interesting exercise. And I'll share just a little bit about the work in general. I'll talk about one piece for some context, and then I'll show you more images. But around the time I started this work, I saw this piece by Robert Rauschenberg called Erase de Kooning, in which he, as a young artist in New York, who was sort of a part of a new wave of artists, took a piece or asked Willem de Kooning, who was at the time the towering figure of abstract expressionism, if he could have a drawing of his for an artwork that he wanted to make. And he proceeded to erase it. And this is what we see today as the final artwork by Rauschenberg. It's just a blank sheet of paper that once held a drawing by de Kooning. And I was really taken by sort of this ghost image. And this work stayed with me for a while. After I went through my breakup, I had been with this man for 5 years. It was very traumatic because he left one night after a fight and I never saw him again for 10 years. So it was a really dramatic rupture of a really important sort of thing in my life. And I proceeded to make a lot of work about it. I proceeded to sort of get over it, move on. But I was left with this sense that something really monumental had happened to me. Beyond just him leaving, like it wasn't really about the breakup anymore. It was something had shifted. I had experienced a very intense set of feelings. I had experienced for the first time panic, regret, fear, loss, all these different things. And I had come to understand that my psyche and sort of my innerness was far darker and far vaster than I had known at first. And I don't mean darker in a perverse sense, but I just mean it in the sense that I just didn't really quite know what was there. And I thought this concept was really interesting, that we could go about life not knowing ourselves, or that we could go about lives not knowing everything that is within us. This piece here called Remember Forgetting came about because my mother called me one day and said, hey, I have all these photos in boxes in my storage unit that I want to get rid of. And in that box, I found a set of photographs of my ex and I just going on trips and doing all these fun things. And I didn't know what to do with them at the time, but I certainly knew that I didn't want to throw them out. There was something strange about that. I had made peace with this whole situation, but I also certainly wasn't going to frame them or look at them. And I proceeded to, sort of inspired by Rauschenberg, to frame them backwards so that what you see is the verso of the images, and the actual images themselves have now been glued permanently to this board. And it was a way of commenting on memory and the way in which memory fades. And for me to look at these objects as a testament for the things that did happen, a way for me to say, you know, that did happen. We were happy at one point, but I don't have to look at it in the eye every single day. And that's kind of where these images came from. And from this moment on, I continued to make works that were primarily black on black and white on white, that sort of forced me to look inward to better understand how these events and subsequent events helped me navigate, you know, this moment of reckoning with getting to know myself in a different way. It was also, for me, a really interesting moment in that for the very first time, I was trying to make pictures about something that was extremely abstract. I wasn't just making representational images. And that meant having to change the way my work looked. It meant recognizing within myself that I couldn't take a picture of things that were abstract feelings. And so I started making these photographs that employed, you know, this black on black technique, which allowed me to obscure certain things. It allowed me to create more mysterious images. I began to use panels and you know, multiple photographs together to tell narratives that were slightly more abstract, that maybe spoke to the way you might feel when you look at something rather than just sort of the plain narrative of looking at an image. And this work was sort of for me a real moment of just shifting my practice and using my practice in a much more visceral and emotional way to make work, and breaking away from sort of these representational notions of making work in a very narrative sense, or following stories from point A to point B. And this is sort of where I ended, which is the works that are in the show. So that brings me to almost time. So I'm just going to show a couple more pictures, and I'm happy to answer more questions later. And that's my timer. I'll show you one more picture here. Okay. Let me.
Thank you,
turn
Rafael.
here. Thank you.
That was fantastic. And
I
now.
feel like I just ran a marathon.
Have a sip of water, take a rest, and you can start. We can start again later. Lorenzo and Sarah.
Hi, I'm Lorenzo Triburgo.
Hello, I'm Sarah Van Dyck.
First of all, thank you so much to Hamida for curating this show, to the Center for Fine Art Photography, and also Artworks Loveland for hosting us for the show and also tonight. I just want to first do a quick land acknowledgement and let you know that we're speaking to you today from Brooklyn, New York, originally Lenape-Hoking, the land of the Lenape people. Due to centuries of colonialism perpetuated by genocide, forced displacement, and systemic oppression, today the Lenape diaspora is dispersed throughout the US and Canada. I encourage you all to visit the website for the Lenape Center in New York City, whose mission is to continue Lenape-Hoking, the Lenape homeland, through community, culture, and the arts. And their website is thelenapecenter.com. I'll start here by saying in 2018, Sarah and I had recently finished production of Monumental Resistance Stonewall, a performance photography and time-lapse video project where I stood in front of the Stonewall Inn, which is commonly referred to as the birthplace of the LGBTQ civil rights movement, for 24 hours, when a memo from the Department of Health and Human Services under the Trump administration argued for a legal definition of gender that is restricted to male or female based on one's genitalia as designated at birth and legally unchangeable.
And a little later that year, when the Trump administration also erased the word transgender from all federal websites, activists recognized this as an attempt to erase trans existence and held "We Will Not Be Erased" rallies, and the hashtag "Won't Be Erased" circulated around on social media.
In response to that, Sarah and I made this picture. And as a person who identifies as trans queer, I have a fraught relationship to passing quote unquote as male, as it often feels like a new form of queer closet. Additionally, how I'm read is tied up with how Sarah is read and vice versa. So my frustration during that political moment led me to realize that my body and Sarah's queer femme gaze was the raw material for a new project.
So slightly off our original notes, where this picture taken was the site of a really huge transformation and a natural disaster that led to it looking this way. It was a place that we loved, that we could no longer be. And making this work was the culmination of feeling like I need to make work to survive. And in the response to that political moment that we talked about, I wanted to create this visual contribution to the "Won't Be Erased" conversation to convey acknowledgement and appreciation of plurality and humanity. And I had a vision of Lorenzo standing on a plinth of some sort, embodying beauty, and I'm like my masculine of center muse.
In June of 2019, for the project, I stopped taking testosterone after 10 years of transgender quote unquote hormone therapy. as a durational performance and exploration of my body as a site of literal and metaphorical gender abolition.
And we spent about 9 months making all different types of photographs. And here's the couple early ones that I took of Lorenzo, and you'll see what they become over time. As we took all these photographs around, we kept coming back to that first Venus picture and decided to pursue that thread and started scouting locations all over New York City and upstate. And we did one shot at the queer section of the Rockaways Beach in Queens, New York.
Sorry.
And we're like, oh, this is it. This is where we're most comfortable, feel the most safe. This is our space. And this part of the beach is packed during the summer months. So we shot during the winter to be able to frame up the shots against the structural elements that you'll see without intruding on anyone. We kept our gear packed and ready and checked the tides and the wind chill to be able to take advantage of the days on the beach without precipitation. And this is the sound of the wind, the bitter New York winter wind. It was like, you know, scary for like Lorenzo's body to be outside in that. But we had this tent and a bunch of equipment to like glitter him up. After we set up the shot, run out, take the photos, get back inside and cover him with like every down thing I could find. So camping. And this is the Venus in its final form with the horizon as I had originally imagined it when I was in Iowa in that earlier picture.
So ultimately the images feature my glitter adorned nude form in familiar gendered art historical poses. While subtle shifts in my gaze or posture play alongside the physical ambiguity of my body to defamiliarize the viewer.
We unhitched the gendered poses that are typical of classical statuary and painting from their binary. With the slightest raise of a shoulder, drop of a hip, or a tilt of Lorenzo's chin, you can see some of my childhood ballet in some of the postures that Lorenzo's modeling. And in Shimmer Shimmer, we employed a playful campiness to suggest a mythical celestial presence.
So the shimmer of glitter on my figure hints at a connection to astrology, which is an important mode of connection in our queer community. And we find that it's a way to engage in spirituality outside of a homophobic patriarchal system. The accompanying still lifes of glitter as constellations are titled with astrological aspects such as sextile and conjunction to reiterate this connection and signal to the viewer that the titles of the figurative images such as Mars refer to the planet and not to the gendered god. So in this way, we're queering or transing the forms, figures, and gestures associated with painted and sculpted imagery of ancient Roman mythological figures.
The glitter here is a metaphor for change itself and trans embodiment itself. It can be perceived differently depending on the perspective of the viewer. The glitter may catch light and shimmer or not. And here is a close-up where you can see, as one would approach the photos in person, that you can see the glitter shining on his body.
My body's continued metamorphoses, how my behaviors and gestures are perceived in relation to my visual presentation is an ongoing durational performance taking place on and off camera. That's really for me rooted, and I think for us, in a rejection of the pathologizing of trans embodiment and a desire to occupy new subjective space. The performative demedicalization of my body, layered again atop these subtle gestural shifts, culminates in binaries coming undone or collapsing into one another, maybe being non-existent where one might expect them to surface.
The figurative photographs were created at the historically gay section of the People's Beach at Jacob Riis Park in the Rockaway Peninsula at Queens, New York, which is a haven for New York City queers in the summer months. Our section of the beach is in front of an abandoned building, the Neponset Beach Hospital, which from 1915 functioned as a children's tuberculosis sanatorium, later a home for World War II veterans, and finally as a city-run nursing home until it was deemed unfit for habitation in 1998. The building remains unoccupied more than 20 years later, and it's a massive structure that is both haunting and beautiful. Like, sincerely, it is beautiful and haunting. Yeah. So our New York City queer sanctuaries, like Free Speech, are fleeting like the shimmer of glitter, and historically they've been
Did
bought
Emma
by,
know that we went to the Batman?
otherwise
Yes.
revitalized or leading to our displacement. The spaces that we carve out for ourselves might seem like scraps or leftovers of the dominant culture, but like with the queer section of Free Speech, these spaces are anti-assimilationist. And we're there precisely because those who occupy dominant identities do not want to be there. And we make it beautiful.
In our collaboration, we're prioritizing the queer femme perspective, and that perspectival agency is the driving force of the project. The act of Sarah looking at me and me performing for her behind the camera is integral to everything Shimmer Shimmer is. I also think that collaboration is a form of resistance. Toxic hyper-individualism permeates our US culture and is rooted in patriarchal value systems. Collaboration debunks the patriarchal capitalist myth of the genius as an individual master. In our collaboration, we're challenging notions of authorship and the muse-artist relationship.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was fantastic. All of your talks, amazing. So I'm curious, now that you've all heard each other speak, were there things that came up for you in sort of how these things relate, how your artworks relate to each other? And did you have some insight? I'm curious to hear from the artists.
You know, I was thinking about just, it's interesting that we each took on sort of a journey of transformation through such different languages. You know, it seems like each of us used a very different set of parameters, very different sets of language, or even ways of working visually to address, you know, personal transformation, which I thought was really interesting. I also found that it seems like all of us sort of, and this is just coming to my head as I'm speaking it, so I don't know if it'll come out in real words, but it seems like all of us in some way or another were tethered to other people or to, you know, family or relationships or the way we were seen or the way we interacted with others. And it seems like we were all trying to find our way within ourselves, you know, as opposed to who we are simply in relationship to someone else, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, Rafael, when you were talking about that, you know, that definition of you.
Kristianne, I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Can you turn your mic up? Or your...
I'm on my headphones. I was just saying that when Rafael was speaking, I could relate to a lot of the things he was saying. I think it's my headphone. Is that better?
Yeah, that's good.
Can you
Thank
hear
you.
me? Maybe it's my
Thank you.
volume. Okay. But I could relate to the relationship part, you know, that Rafael was talking about, and how I got lost in my relationship. I lost, you know, myself. And as a mom, I had to just keep going. And as a wife, I had to just keep going. And then I was really wanting to get back to that person. And I felt like I needed to get back to that person for my family, that it was going to benefit them for me to be my authentic self. And that this project helped me kind of bring that out and manifest that. So.
Yeah.
I was also
that's interesting.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Hamina.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was also thinking about how we are all using obviously lens-based media, but taking these personal experiences and then transforming them into something that's, I don't know, sort of maybe taking a personal experience and bringing it into something more macro, or for lack of a, basically not diaristic, right? So kind of taking these personal experiences and mediating them through our own aesthetic choices, which I think is also interesting, an interesting connection between all of us.
Yeah, definitely. in the way the show came together was very much about this time of COVID, of the pandemic, of how this period of pause in the beginning, at least, and how many people were sort of rethinking what makes sense. And Kristianne and I were in this critique group, and her work really spoke to me in that way, because it was also, I feel like a lot of a lot of women go through that. Of course, men do too, but women as the wife and mother, often the role is different. And so women often get lost in that role. And so I was really interested in how other people were exploring that. And it was so wonderful to find all of you and to be able to put the work together. And the work also has an underlying sort of theme of water, which is so much of the theme of water is about transformation and cleansing and, all of these different elements. So I'm curious if we have any questions from the audience, or if the artists have any other comments. One thing I would love, Rafael, is if you would take the time to explain. It gave me chills actually when you explained it. I'm in the gallery, so I'm gonna turn this around. If you can explain the piece behind me.
Yeah, and I can share a better image of it as well.
Probably a better.
I had planned on talking about it, and then time flew. So I'll be quick though. So this work right here was a work that I created at many years after I had gone through this kind of separation that I described that was kind of monumental for me. And I had been living in New York City. I had been dating this person. We had separated. I had spent some time processing it. I moved to Seattle, and I hadn't heard from him in maybe about 3 years or so. And I had this moment of just really this moment of clarity where I woke up one morning and I thought to myself, I think I'm done living my life sort of around this event. I think I'm done sort of thinking about this person all the time. I think I'm ready to just kind of be myself in my own life. And so I just kind of made this really intentional commitment to myself to lead my life in a different way, and to let go of sort of the ghost of this person. And shortly after that, I received a text message from my ex, whom I hadn't heard from in years. Like, I'm talking like maybe an hour after, that said like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I was kind of freaked out by it because the timing was very strange. And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. What's going on?" And he said, "I just had this really, really sudden visceral feeling that all of a sudden you were gone. And that something maybe had happened to you and that you just weren't there anymore. And I just wanted to make sure you were okay." And I realized that I had plucked myself from him, and he had felt that 3,000 miles away on the other side of the country. And I think up until this moment, I've always been a very pragmatic person. I never considered myself a spiritual person. But this moment really made me realize that we're very small beings in a much larger universe, and that there's just so much out there that we can't explain, and that I needed to be open, that it was crucial to my growth to be open to a universe that was perhaps unexplainable, that was perhaps difficult to understand, that I didn't have to have all the answers. And the image you see here, I thought for years about how to make a picture of that, and I couldn't make a picture of that event. And I landed on this sort of abstracted piece that you see here, where you see this orb of light, sort of the black part representing myself, sending out this intention or this feeling out into the universe, thinking that he would just fade away and disappear, not realizing that every piece of energy that we put out in the world eventually reaches someone or touches something that then absorbs it and turns it into something else. And the bottom part being sort of maybe not him, but being these the consequence of my decision. And this piece sort of became a symbol for a new way of thinking in my life. So
I love that. I love that story and that artwork. It's really powerful.
thank you.
Any questions from artists? Do you have questions for each other? Comments?
I had a question for Lorenzo actually and Sarah, because I was thinking of, this really radical act of using your body as performance, in a like your own body, and the changes in your body as this very long-term performance. That's a really big commitment to make to yourself as a person, which you had already made once. And now sort of in service of this artwork that you're making. And I'm curious sort of what other artists you had been looking at who maybe had engaged in this type of endurance performance that goes beyond, standing outside for one night or doing things that are hard but eventually end. Just curious, like who those influences were, like who you see yourself and what universe you see yourself.
Yeah, so the artist who I actually like not so long ago, I just I think it was in the process of applying to something, was reflecting on the influences, and I realized that the artists who have influenced me most over time are performance artists who use photography. Coco Fusco and Guillermo Pena in the Couple in a Cage, that project I'm always fascinated with. That's of course a little older, that's like 1989 or something. Dred Scott is probably one of my artists who I admire, like contemporary artists who I admire most right now. And like his project, The Impossibility of Freedom in a Country Built on Slavery and Genocide. And then Pope Al, William Pope Al, but Pope Al, the performance artist who famously crawled down the entire length of Manhattan on Broadway, kind of retracing the steps of colonialist imperialists, and so they're all like artists, performance artists of color, happen to be those three come to mind. And so that's that. I guess Pope L probably is the longest because he did that project over 5 years. So in increments, the whole length of Broadway. Castles is a contemporary trans artist who kind of uses testosterone and microdosing of steroids in some of their works to build up their body. That's a little bit different, I think, but I think it's relevant here to talk about in terms of like use of the body. And I think I have another project called Gum Shots where I'm using gum, and you can look it up, but the idea of sort of expanding upon or kind of being in conversation with feminist artists of the 70s who use their bodies in their works and kind of pushing that ideology forward into this idea of gender abolition, I think is also like really interesting to me. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Somehow each of you spoke about relationship and family. As I was listening to you present your work, I had that feeling of when you like slip into a hot spring and you settle down and everything calms and you can focus in this unified way with the people around you. And that's what I feel as we're all speaking over Zoom. It was a powerful feeling in this virtual room tonight. And this body of work was how we spent family time during the pandemic. And we had, sorry, I'll stop there, but it was,
Yeah, it's okay.
Oh,
I don't know what you're
We-
gonna say, but go ahead.
like we were living and working in this small space, and being able to get to a body of salt water in New York was so massively important to me. Like I grew up in a landlocked state, always wishing for mountains and ocean. And the fact that like, while like this national and global mourning for the lives that we lost and the systems that cause it to be that way, I needed to be by salt water. And in large part, yeah, I feel like these photos were a discussion of like our relationship, how we see each other, how the world sees us, how the random couple of winter residents of that beach that would walk there every day how they saw us together. And yeah, for me, it was a lot like relating to the world and her people during pandemic.
I appreciate it. Oh, okay. I was just looking at the chat window, making sure that it wasn't a question, but thank you for the comment there. But I was also, Alicia, you had talked about the pandemic and the importance of that and the creation of your work, both being with your mom and then being separated. And the one image we have of Luna, where it's a full moon, was actually like created on the last full moon in March 2020, before the city shut down. Like 2 days later, we were quarantined, you
I
know?
think it was March 20th.
Yeah. Okay. I don't remember, but March 20th. Yeah. Yes, I don't know. So I don't know if Alicia, you have this feeling, but I have this feeling like that image in particular has a weight to it that is hard to explain. That people have reacted to that image in positive ways or whatever, but it's sometimes the weight of the pandemic and the fact that it was like this last full moon is, yeah, hard to explain, but it is very much present. I'm just wondering about that for you.
Do you mean in terms of what I felt with the picture, or in terms of how that kind of portrays in both of our works?
I guess like the sense that the pandemic was part of the creation of the project in some way, even if that wasn't the original like intention, it made its way in. And like, I guess the level to which you feel like that's present in the work itself, or just for you, or I don't know, just kind of reflecting on that a little bit.
Yeah, and quickly to kind of go over your photo, out of all the photos, that was one of one of those photos that really caught my attention. Not only like composition wise, is like the moon is in the perfect place, but I knew there was something like something spiritual going on specific in that photo, and also why like sun and moon, right? Luna y sol. But in terms of how the works came together for us, like I feel it couldn't have happened without the pandemic. And that is something that, you know, even though the pandemic was a rough time, I was really stressed out with my status here. I was like always getting bombarded with, you have to come back, all my family here, everyone. It was like all this is stress. And all I could think about is like, how good of a time I'm actually having here with my family in Cuba, who I haven't seen in a long time. And I would have to say that I'm like very grateful for the pandemic. For me, it was a very big, it represented a very big shift in my life, even when I came back here to the States. And when it comes to the work that we created, it's again, if we hadn't had that time specifically, it couldn't have happened. Like as I mentioned in the artist talk, is like, we wanted to do things together. We still, my dad, my mom, and I have plans to do a show together. He's in Spain, my mom is in Cuba, I am here. And I know that there are things that are going to happen in the future that it's not going to be us working to get there. Something's going to happen that is going to bring us together to do that show. And that's exactly how I feel about the pandemic and how those works came together. It's like, because of the pandemic, we actually got to spend 5 months together. I couldn't have done that if, you know, politically speaking and immigration wise, I would have, you know, been able to stay there. And so I do feel that there is a big spiritual way in the way that we, even if we don't believe, or if we're not spiritual people, I think that art revolves in a spiritual environment with energy. What we put out there what we receive. And I am actually a big spiritual person, and my work revolves around how things happen, especially knowing that I'm not a full-time artist. So I also have my own business, my work. And if I always push to put the two together, it doesn't happen. I kind of have to, let it happen. And I've learned that the hard way, wanting to push things so much. And like, once I kind of take a break is when things come together. Like this show, for instance, like last year, I was like, I'm working on my business so much. I need to get some time for my art. And then all of a sudden, Hamida, emails me, and I'm like, yeah, perfect, and I feel like this is the way it happens. I also feel that, the way that your work was created, and Rafael's and Kristianne, is like, if we hadn't had those experiences, Rafael, if you hadn't had that breakup, you guys, if Trump hadn't done that, in terms of the racing transgender out of websites and putting these laws, then our work hadn't happened. So sometimes our things are unfortunate, but they are making us who we are right now, and they're making this show happen. They're making Hamida put together this show. So it's all energy and us attracting these things too.
Yeah, I believe it. And I think, obviously, this crowd is not who needs to hear this. You're all here because you understand this, but this is why art is so essential. It is our basic humanity expressed as art. And that's why it's so important to support artists and to attend these things. They can be life-changing, and I feel so lucky to have been working with all of you on this show, and to have conversations with all of you on this show, and to get to know you better and your work better, because I'm the lucky one for that. And so I really appreciate you all being here tonight. And thank you to all the guests. We are recording this. We will make it available probably on our YouTube channel. So we're at time. And anyway, thank you all for everything.
Thank you.
If you're in the area, please come to our closing reception. That's on March 26th from 1 to 4. Kristianne Riddle will be here, and there's going to be some music, and so you can actually see the work in person. We're lucky here in Colorado that the transmission rate is really low now, and so it feels much safer to be in the public space. I do also want to say thank you to both Fort Fund grants for supporting us over the years, and also Colorado Creative Industries for supporting us over the years, and for everyone else that's helped make this happen. I do want to say a special thank you to Katie Kalkstein, who's going to show herself very shortly. She is our board president. She's also an artist herself, and without her, none of this would be happening. So Katie, thank you.
Oh, thank you to the beautiful work and all that everybody said today. You almost like caught me in tears here. So.
All right. Well, thank you. And we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
you. Bye, guys. It's good to see you again.